Hi, this is Thea, and you're listening to Girls in Gaming, the podcast that dives into how girls and women experience, develop, and expand the world of gaming. Join me each week as we explore different topics around the female experiences in the world of gaming. I think I'm in love. The last time I felt so enraptured by a game was Dragon Age Inquisition, a game of illustrious beauty, interesting characters, and a gripping story that blew my mind with shocking twists at the end. And yet somehow, Baldur's Gate 3 has blown even that epic adventure out of the water and may have potentially ruined, or at least dampened, all future adventure games for me. Unlike my husband, I haven't played Baldur's Gate from Larion Studios, so I'm not an expert on the game itself. For the purity of the show, today's guest is none other than our in-house Baldur's Gate master, Lee Sensei. Say hello, Lee Sensei.
Konnichiwa.
That means hello in Japanese. For those of you who don't know, my husband is a Japanese teacher, so hence the sudden change of language and really unusual introduction to the show. So I have my husband here, Lee Sensei, to talk about Baldur's Gate 3 because I'm in love with it. I'm very biased about it, but I also don't really know the history of the game Baldur's Gate, other than I know that it's based off D&D. I think specifically Baldur's Gate is 5e edition.
Yeah, that's right. Do you want me to talk about it now, or?
I actually have some really specific questions for you, but that will be one of the things that I want you to talk about, absolutely. First of all, though, I want to know, and I'm sure other people would as well, could you tell us a bit about how Baldur's Gate 3 differs in gameplay compared to its predecessors?
I've been thinking about this, and it's an interesting question. On the one hand, it differs quite a lot. It's very much like a modern game where you can rotate the camera and you can have a lot of control over items and modifying things and crafting. Oh my goodness, crafting is such a thing that I think the last 20 years, especially last 15 years, is just every major, especially RPG game, needs to have things like that. But I think in a way it is almost exactly the same like the first two games, because the first two games were basically very as accurate and as faithful an adaptation of the second edition of Dungeons and Dragons could be in a video game. And Baldur's Gate 3 is as close and accurate and as faithful an adaptation of the current 5th edition of the game is.
So, to summarize, you're saying that the original Baldur's Gate and 1 and 2 were very much like how you'd expect to play a game of Dungeons and Dragons at the time. And same goes here. But just for those of you who don't actually play Dungeons and Dragons, there are multiple rule books that have changed over time. And the current edition 5e is a hell of a lot more flexible in terms of rules and interpretations than the previous ones. Is that correct?
It's more flexible. Absolutely. It's more flexible. It throws away a lot of the baggage that came with the earlier editions of the games, where the Gary Gygax and the original creators had very, very specific assumptions about how you should play the game and what does it mean to be a particular race or a particular class. And you have many more restrictions than there are today.
So it's very rigid in its gameplay, which I don't think we feel in Baldur's Gate 3. I think particularly, I mean, we have to think about the fact that this is a video game. It has to be programmed. It has to have dialogue, lines of dialogue that are triggered in a specific way. There is literally no way that they could have made it for us to play any freer, in my opinion, than we currently get to do it. We can kill everyone and still get through the story in some capacity. I feel like they've tried their hardest to cater to every way in which someone would want to play this game.
Yeah, I think it carries through that spirit of the first two Baldur's Gate. For someone who has probably played dozens, if not 100+ hours of the first two games, like they have a very, very strong and very big part of my childhood. the story wise, nothing really comes through. There's the name of the game, there's the place Baldur's Gate, which you don't even get to, which is actually interesting. Like in the first game and in the third game, you don't get to the actual city, the name of the frigging game, until, I don't know, 40, 50 hours of gameplay, and depending on how much it gets sidetracked by all the things that you can do on these two really big games. But there is no continuation, essentially. No big continuation between the first two games and the third one. The first and second one, you're playing the same character. The protagonist carries through. It's still their story. It's still your story from the first to the second game until the very end. And then don't want to spoil anything for whoever hasn't played the first two games yet. But by the time you get to the end of the second game, or specifically the expansion of the second game, you get to a point where, okay, the plot goes, this is a big, massive, epic way to end this story, and technically, I suppose, the character hasn't died, and therefore their story could continue, but it just ends in a way it's like, yep, I think that's it, that's the end. But I don't think and they mentioned some events. There are some characters that flow through, like NPCs or companions from the first two games that appear in the third game, but they're very small throwbacks. Essentially, the third game is, even though it's set in the same universe, it happens 100 years later. It was created, I think, to be very separate, have a very separate identity, even though as I said before, it does basically the same thing as what the first two games did, just in the modern period.
So I'm curious. So we know, and I guess if anyone else out there is playing Baldur's Gate 3, and if the current statistics on current gameplays say anything, then it's likely a lot of people would be. With Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, were the illicit empire an issue, or was it another big bad?
See, and that's the thing, right? The big bad is very different. The first two games were very personal, very focused around the protagonist being the driver for the story. A lot of things happen because the protagonist is who they are, and then it's all very personal. The third game, yeah, I guess, like, you have this problem that you have to solve, and the problem is caused by the big bad guys, and you need to figure out what they're doing in order to stop them and stop yourself from dying or changing into something that you don't want to be, and gaining power along the way if that's what interests you as a character. But the stakes are not as personal as in the first two games. So it's very much about, compared to the first two games, it's very much about, discovering the world and the other people and characters and NPCs who live in that world. And the game builds itself around that interaction, around that discovery, which it does extremely, extremely well. And everyone just loves it for that reason, because everywhere you go in this game, there's something interesting there, there's someone interesting there, and there's many, many choices and many, many decisions that you can make, and you never quite know what's going to happen and how is it going to open and close a lot of different doors for you. I was reading an interview with one of the designers for Bethesda who designed the Skyrim and Fallout games, and he said that the big difference between the two games, or the design philosophies, is that they're both large worlds, lots of people, lots of things to do, lots of places to go to. But Bethesda's approach to its game is that it doesn't want to cut off anything for anyone. If you want to, you can explore and experience everything in the game. There are some points where you can make a choice and that will close things off, but generally, like 95% of it doesn't matter what else you did elsewhere. If you want to, you can experience everything because they made this massive world, right? So they feel like that you should be able to experience this massive world. Why would you want to cut that off for the players? Whereas Larion's approach to Baldur's Gate 3 is no, if whatever choices you make ought to be meaningful and that ought to have consequences. And those two things are two sides of the same coin, right? If something is to be meaningful, it has to have consequences. If something doesn't have consequences, then it's not meaningful. It's just, okay, well, that was something nice to have, but it really doesn't change anything, right? That was cool, but doesn't really change anything. It's not meaningful. It's a very interesting philosophy to take, isn't it? That, okay, you made that choice, fine, cool. That's the choice that you make. But you know what? Then you can't do these things. Then you can't experience this entire section of the game that we've made that we spent thousands of hours developing, and you can't get to see that. Boo hoo to us. But it makes it so much better. I think that's one of the things that we love about it.
It's definitely one of the things that I love about it as well. It feels real. That's what makes it feel real.
Yeah.
Because that's what life is like. It's really, really annoying at some points when you make a decision and you go, man, I wish I had have saved before I made that choice. But as our lovely narrator would say, these are the consequences of your actions.
Yeah.
And we have to live with those. So kind of like on a bit of a tangent back there, talking about big open worlds and games like Baldur's Gate, we actually played a little bit of both of Divinity 1 and 2. So just for anyone who doesn't know, Larion Studios made Divinity Original Sin 1 and Divinity Original Sin 2. We played a little bit of both of those games before we played Baldur's Gate 3. And I say a little bit of both of those games because I think, and we can both agree on this, that they didn't do so well on the consequence part, in that it was a hugely open world with, and okay, you know what? It's similar to Baldur's Gate in that it had multiple lines of dialogues and a lot of people to interact with and a lot of potential side quests and things like that, but it lacked meaning and purpose. And also the overall story, the narrative that was supposed to drive the game, was completely lost by everything else going on in that world. This, Baldur's Gate 3, feels direct in that we know who the big bad is. We know what they want. They want our brains. That's a bit easier to follow than I actually still to this day cannot remember what the plot line for for Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2 was. I have no idea. At some point there was lightning, some earthquakes.
It's interesting. Like, I don't think in terms like, if you count the number of like proper nouns and names and made up people and races and shits and gods and stuff like that between the two games, they're probably about the same. But yes, there is that there was that lack of personal connection to the game. There was a lack of, and I don't mean just personal from the perspective of the protagonist that you're playing with, but I think in lack of the
no one in that world.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
Care
there's no connection between my character, my protagonist, me, and everyone in it. Whereas this one, there's a very strong connection between, not only between you and the companions, who are extremely well done, but between you and many of the NPCs that you come across as well.
The drows,
yeah,
the
you get very
iron hand gnomes.
Yeah.
I cared about everyone I came across, but for different reasons. And maybe I care about them not because I like them, but because I care about the role that they play in that game. It's all very intentional, very purposeful, very connected. Nothing in that world is not without purpose. One of my favorite connections that's been throughout the game is the strange ox.
Yeah.
And I love how that turns up at pretty much every point. And yeah, I'm not going to ruin that, but definitely speak to the cow in Emerald Grove.
I think one thing that also helps with Baldur's Gate 3 is also its how it its presentation. It's with Larion Studios, it's stuck with what the first two Baldur's Gate. These are pure isometric viewpoint. If you're not sure what isometric means, is that from point of view that's not quite top down, is not quite by the side, is that in between space, looking down at an angle, diagonally, exactly on the screen, and it never changes. I don't remember if you might be able to zoom in, but it never changes. So whenever you have a dialogue with a character, it might zoom in a bit, but it's still quite far away, very detached. And there was a lot of good, interesting side quests and stories. I still remember this one with the chicken that you come across. Their eggs had been stolen, and you find an egg, and it's been corrupted and turned into this monster thing, and you have to kill it, which is very sad. I remember that today. It's very, very well crafted idea.
Yes,
but then the difference with Baldur's Gate 3 is that every conversation that you have is that, I don't know what you call it, cinematic. I don't know. You have this.
Yes,
it's as if
semi-cinematic.
It's as if you are standing there in this perspective, and this is that's what you can see.
Which is one
of
of
that
the
character.
which is
Well,
one
you
of the
probably know.
reasons why our characters also, well, why I think that they didn't give the character a voice, not just because of the complexities of having to navigate that and the cost involved in having someone voice over in 7 different ways, but having no voice allows us to project as well ourselves and our voice, or how we interpret our character to sound, because no one is going to be able to get that right. And look, we do get a pick for when our character says something, but a lot of the time when I talk, I'm like, who the hell was that? And then I realize it was me talking. And I just want to backtrack a bit and just correct. You were talking about Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2 when you were talking about the demonic chicken eggs, yes?
That was number 2, yes.
Yeah, but you said Baldur's Gate. So just FYI, it was Divinity Original Sin. It had in an incredible amount of side quests that were fun, but did not add to the game at all. And I think one thing in Baldur's Gate is I very rarely find myself doing something that doesn't add to the game, if not in context to the actual big bad, or my companions, or the people of Emerald Grove, or the Shadowlands. Anything, it adds to some part of that. If it's unraveling a secret to unlock weapons, or befriending the robot at the top of Leonor's tower, which I recently did. So guess what? It's possible. You just have to find the right composition of music. And I did that. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I'm digressing.
I think it's Baldur's Gate 3 is, despite the very, very large lack of humans until certain points of the game, these characters are very human, right? Your interactions with them are very human. Their motivations are very human and deep as well for many of them. And it takes time and commitment, and you just discover parts of their story. It's like, that explains that. That's why they are the way they are. It's not, they always come across in some ways, that's meeting some cliche or something, and you discover this other layer to it, and that's what this game is, and it's this massive onion, and so many layers, and you keep crying every time you get past one layer until you get to the end, when will it end? And you don't know, and you never know. I think that's the amazing thing about this game. It's like you never know, what have you missed, what could be different, what is not there that you don't even know is not there. Right?
Yep. Are we the 1%? Did we discover it, or have we missed something?
Or is it a bug? And sometimes that's great.
The bugs.
It's a bug. You don't know. You don't know, because it's like it just, yeah.
I think Baldur's Gate 3 has been a huge step up for Larion. The art style is quite similar to Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, and some of the mechanics in terms of the gameplay as well, which I was happy about, because I love a good turn-based combat, because I can't unravel multiple things on the screen at once and end up panicking and button smashing. This allows me to be methodical and thoughtful, and every action that I take has purpose. Anyway, I'm going on to a whole different section of this thing. Right, so I wanted to talk about character creation, because before I got it, when it was still in beta, I was watching a lot of TikTok, as I do, when I should be sleeping. And I was seeing people saying that they were spending hours on their character creation. And I thought, that's going to be me. It wasn't. It took me like a good hour, but it didn't take me that long. And I'm so sorry, Larion Studios. I know how incredibly difficult this is to actually give the sheer range and diversity of races and gender and all of that. But I was a bit like, oh, okay. I wish that there was more to really give our characters grit and personality. And I think for me, and I think this resonates actually quite a lot with women out there that I've talked to that also play this game, I was frankly kind of gutted to find that you can be a tall, buff chick, or you could be a short, petite one. Where are my curvy girls at? I was so annoyed. I wouldn't call myself particularly curvy or anything, but I had in my head This idea that I was going to have this beautifully curvy, little bit chunky, kind of druid, like goddess formed body, right? And then we get the classic petite feminine woman or the really bulky butch looking woman. And I thought, great, we've been categorized into two body types again. Can I just say, most women don't fit either of those body types. It's really frustrating. And I know I'm ranting here. And as I've been informed by people before, specific person I'm talking about, so if you hear this, sorry, but also it's true. Yeah, I know it's a fantasy game and most people probably want to be the best version of themselves or someone that's really attractive or blah, 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 blah. I'm not trying to find something to pick on about. But it just feels like if I'm going to project myself into a game, I want to be playing someone that I find visually pleasing, that is different, you know? I enjoy that. I want to feel unique in that situation, and I don't if I have abs like everyone else. My main character, I'm sorry, but she's not a goddess. Not in the ab form. I need my short curvy girl and I can't find her. And I'm really let down by that. So I guess like putting that over to you, did you have any real issues that you found with character creation, or were you okay and kind of happy with how things were?
I was happy with character creation, but I absolutely understand and sympathize with what you just said there. Absolutely everything, and I think that Larion should have been more. Every developer needs to be more ambitious with his character creation. I think Sims 4, from what I've seen, is really good with that on its way.
Yeah, like they do a lot of updates for character creation where they've changed a lot of that.
Yeah, compared to where they were at the beginning. They were exactly where Larion and I presume other studios must mostly be. I think it's starting to change, and hopefully that in the next iteration of a big game like this will be better. My issue, moving away from character creation, but still on the same theme, I guess, is the lack of diversity with companions. Out of the, if I'm counting this correctly, 7 characters that you can eventually, 8 characters, I remember another one, that you can eventually hire or recruit into your party. Hang on, am I getting the math here correctly? About three are humans. 4 or 5 are some version of elf, and one of them is Githyanki. So neither of the two, but they're all, there are no dwarves, gnomes, or halflings, or dragonborn, or half orcs, or am I missing anyone else? Anyway, they're all either humans, elves, or one Githyanki, and that's it. And I'm like, really? Really? It's like, that should have been like the first thing you're thinking about character. If you think about just their personalities, they're all very different. And I love them. And they're all well acted and amazing. And I love them all. But at the same time, I'm like, what was happening in the design room about this? Like the first steps is like, is this it? It's like, why? It's, it's amazing. It's great. Like what's there is amazing. I just thought like, why were they not more creative with this?
Yeah, in a world that you've made so diverse, why is your companionship so not?
It's actually very difficult to come across just like a plain elf or human that's not your companion character in the first 50 hours of the game. That you come across like druids and like a whole group of tieflings and goblins and underground dwarves and mushroom people and the undead and stuff like that, and it's like it's just a bit mind-boggling. It's a bit weird. It stands out compared to everything else that's with this game. Your lack of diversity with companions it just stands out.
In terms of character creation, when you mentioned Sims 4, one thing that actually did remind me of that I think we can all applaud is the fact that it came out with the option to essentially be gender neutral or to select to be a male but present femininely. So in terms of gender representation, I think that was really good. And I think my only real issue with the game in terms of character creation was just, and I have seen other people point out as well, companions like Astarion and everyone having abs. And someone's like, "Are you telling me that Gale has a six pack? That shit's magic. Like, there ain't no other way that someone who reads books like as much as he does is going to have a six pack." And again, I know, yes, it's fantasy, but I think that it is more impactful when one, we can see representations of ourselves and reality in that, because it just makes it feel easier to connect to. And I think one of the other arguments I heard as well is like, well, we want something nice to look at. Need I remind you out there that everyone has different tastes? Not everyone needs either a petite lady or man, or a buff king or queen. Some of us like a little bit of curve, a little bit of dab belly, pot belly, something going on in the middle there. It's a rant. I had to get out. I know there's an incredible amount of options in terms of skin colors and hair and things like that. But I think the one other thing I would have really loved to have seen was just more options for faces. 6 options is not enough. I know it sounds like a lot, but when you don't like any of the 6 options for that race, it's not a lot. And then you just have to pick one of the ones you dislike the least.
I think the issue here is because they have so many races. It's one thing if you just had like the one race or even 4 races and you have sliders for each. I think Larion was they had a resourcing and time issue here with character creation because of the fact that they had to accommodate all the many different base races, species, whatever they're calling them these days, for the game, having to create custom or sliders that worked and didn't break. If you put this in this point and this point will create something that doesn't look like a complete monster and have teeth growing out of the eyeballs or something like that. This is just my assumption, but I think something like that would have played into why instead of going that way, they decided instead just to give preset faces for each of the races. Which is, yes, it really cramps on creativity and being able to customize someone to look how you want them to look. But it was a compromise that they had to make. Again, just an assumption, but...
No, I agree with that. Plus, they also said in their press release before they actually released the complete version of the game that they made this game as compatible to modding as possible because they knew that something like this was going to be an issue. I think you'll just find me complaining because we are currently playing on the PlayStation 5, which means we don't have access to mods, which means I am unfortunately having my creativity stifled. But this is fine because I forked out and I bought it on the PC as well so I could mod it. So moving on from character creations, let's talk a little bit about the things that we love the most and the things that really frustrate us about the game. I think we've pretty much covered it in one sense or another, but for me it's that interconnectedness of the game. I read every letter that I picked up, and Lee Sensei here likes to sell them, and I go and buy them back because I get really frustrated because I'm like, no, I need to collect all the books. I need to read all the books in this game and read all of the letters because I'm going to find something that they've put in there. I'm convinced.
Yeah, I think that is one of the issues with like playing with as multiplayer for this game is that you will naturally, because you just go off. You can't just stop and share things. Oh, you can, I suppose. Yeah, anyone can play the game however you want. But for us, we don't stop and share things because we're off just doing our own thing in our own area. We're discovering things and we relay things and we still experience a lot of things. But yeah, I think it's exactly like what you are. I'm playing my own single player version of the game at the moment, and I am reading through most of the text, and I'm loving just discovering all these bits about the story and the lore and how much it's like it gives you hints about various puzzles or characters, and it's just all well thought. And I enjoy doing all that because you discover this game and it really rewards you for that, I think. Absolutely. And in a very most of the time easy to fall away, or sometimes when it's not easy to follow, but you figure, oh yeah, I get how this works together, and you put the dots together, and yeah, you just it's a great feeling.
So, in terms of the frustrations with the game that I have, I think it predominantly just comes down to multiplayer, specifically on the PlayStation 5, because we've had issues from the get-go, though I will say after recent patches hasn't been as bad. It was nearly unplayable in terms of lagging and bugging out and just crashing. That was destructive. Like, they are so lucky that they made a brilliant game that we would put up with that, because I don't think there's any other game that I would have ground my teeth and restarted and be like, fine, I'll do the last half an hour again. I'm okay with that. But there are a lot of things that could still be worked on, specifically the audio in two-player when you are having conversations. You can't have multiple conversations at once. Technically, you can, but if you want the audio playing, you cannot. It would be nice if it automatically had us both in a conversation so that I don't have to manually go to listen in, or I don't know, just some other mechanism. I know it's something that's really technically hard to work out, but it is quite frustrating when you're working with another person on that. I think the other thing that particularly Lee Sensei was getting frustrated by was how it automatically dubbed anyone but him as the main character. So even if you were triggering conversations that were critical or would like start a cutscene, you were never the main character in it. You were like, no, the game did not want your face on that screen. For me, very amusing. For someone who genuinely wanted to be a part of the game, not so much. So I think those were some of our biggest frustrations with the game, was just navigating that multiplayer, and hopefully they continue to bring out more patches to just tweak a lot of those little bugs and things like that. Before I forget, I haven't really lent into the whole like put more of those tadpoles in your eyes scenario.
Right.
So, well, they go in your eyeballs actually, and then they worm their way into your brain.
That's
So
the first one. How we don't actually know how the
they
other
put
ones
it in
do
your
it.
eyeball. They say on
Weird.
multiple occasions.
No, that's only the first one. Maybe
No,
all the other
It's,
ones go through
it's
your
also
ears
the
or
late one.
something.
Anyway, I bring this up because
Or
right
the
now there
sequel.
is a giant brain on our TV when it looks like there's like you're killing off parts of your brain, so that's fun. So what kind of illithid powers do you currently have?
I'll go over that in a second. I probably just want to say quickly on what I find frustrating with the game. Not so much the points that you had out, you said previously, valid points, but I think for me, inventory management is the
inventory.
like I get through it. It's kind of like a game within a game. Is something I need to solve. I need to solve, and there's a solution to it. But also, it doesn't need to be. It takes up a massive amount of time, and it could just like several things could just fix it. Just save time. Like one is just having a quick like food, for example, doesn't need to go into my inventory, and because of the fact that you can instantly send crap to your camp, and the only time you ever need food really is at camp. There's no reason why it should be going straight into my bags. It should automatically be transported back into my camp because I don't need to hold it, and I can teleport it back to camp instantly at any time. It's just the fact that I have to manually select each one and say you go to camp, and then now I go to the next type of item, and there's like dozens of different food and drinks, and my god, these people must get so drunk, that I need to send back. It's a massive pain, and having to find items and things, it's yeah, pick things up as well. I think there's too much stuff to be able to interact with in the world to pick up crap, and that takes up a lot of time, and I know some people like that, but I think it's not a great use of my time, and I think there should be a lot less of it.
I hope that one day they make a bag of holding so I can pick up everything that I bought, because I want to pick up everything.
I don't want to pick up everything.
I know.
So what was your actual question? That was.
Oh, you forgot, right. Illithid brain tadpoles.
yes.
I could see you're killing your brain.
So I'm trying to play an evil playthrough. Spoiler alert, I've killed the tieflings, and well, specifically, I got the tieflings and the druids to kill each other and then took over their place. That was fun. Did a few other evil things along the way, and one of the well, is this an evil thing? Jury is still out. Anyway, I've implanted more of these tadpole things into my brain, and it's slowly spreading their black tendrils across my otherwise pink, healthy-ish brain and giving me powers. So the first power, the four of the powers I've unlocked so far is one is my first attack roll or check gains my proficiency bonus as a bonus on top of the base bonus that you get. Every time I have a long rest, I can change an attack roll into a critical hit once. I can cast a spell that inflicts psychic damage and heal myself at the same time. And every time someone hits me with a spell, I can inflict psychic damage onto them. It's all pretty cool stuff. And so far with no... I mean, what are the consequences? So far, none. It's all great. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, just like black veins in your brain, and part of it is completely white. That's what a brain's supposed to look like. I need to do a semi-evil. I can't be brutal. I'm not an evil person. I think the way your brother-in-law kind of said it was like chaotic neutral kind of thing. Always pick the option that seems really sarcastic and a little bit bitchy, but not because you're evil, because it's funny. We don't outrightly murder people, but we're also not really nice. I think I can live with that. I think that's the playthrough I want, and I'll have a chuckle at it while I'm doing it. Okay. So kind of lastly, before we wrap up this episode for today, I think you said not too long ago that we're going to be lucky to get another Baldur's Gate game at all. And if we do, we wouldn't be looking at it for at least another decade. Do you stand by this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people might remember that the last Baldur's Gate game came out in 2003, if I have my maths correct. So it's been 20 years. It's actually kind of great, like a 20-year anniversary, right? And then we have such an amazing game, such a worthy successor to that series. It's actually, I think, it created an entire new generation of people who love RPGs for the same reason I did, because of this like one particular game, the second game in particular, that just drew me into RPGs and made me want to play Dungeons and Dragons and all that, get me into it. Anyway, the reason why I don't think that another game like this will come out, I think partly is the scale of the game. It took Larion, I don't know how many years, but I think this game was in early access for 3 years, I think, 4 years, and part of that was COVID and such, but still, this is a huge game. It takes a long amount of time for them to make a game like this, and I think, understandably, I don't think Larion wants to make another game like this, partly because it's exhausting, partly because it would be reductive, right? They've made it. It is amazing. What else do you want, right? More of the same? I guess, okay, sure, but I don't think anyone who's really genuinely creative person wants to just be known for doing the same thing over and over again, right? What else could they really do with this? They achieved their goals. They've made the most D&D game as a video game possible, I think. That's amazing. It's near perfect, other for some technical issues, technical design issues. It's great. Otherwise, you'd just be making the same thing, but in a different space, different time, different characters. Which, sure, that's fine, but I understand if they don't want to do that. And I highly respect them for not.
I agree. I think this kind of, having you say that reminds me a little bit of Mass Effect and how I think they definitely are, aren't they? They're working on that new Mass Effect game, and my reaction was not one of joy. I was like, oh my God, why would you do that? You ended it so well. You've made all of my choices redundant. I hate you. I refuse to play this game. I'll see other people play it, but I'll still dislike it. I just hate that if you have something good, it's okay to end on a happy note with said game in said series. That being said, I think it was in that same kind of like live streamed conference when they introduced Baldur's Gate to everyone once it was properly finished, that they said that they were going to be moving on to their next project. Heard any gossip about what that could potentially be, knowing that it's not likely Baldur's Gate? It's really unlikely that it's going to be another Divinity Original Sin. Cross my heart and hope to die that that's the truth. What about you? What do you think they might be working on? Something similar or something completely left field?
I don't know, but I think whatever it is that they're will be making on, everyone's going to be watching them, that's for sure. And I'll be watching them for sure.
I think it's a hell of a lot of pressure to live up to this.
I think that's another reason why they wouldn't want to make another game, another Baldur's Gate game. I mean, because of this and how well received it's been, it's like okay, yeah,
You have to
let's
live
do
up to
something
that.
different, do something new, so that we don't have this pressure on us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, would you recommend Baldur's Gate 3? And do you think it's worth the hype?
That's a good question. I think it's worth the hype, absolutely. Anyone who loves RPGs, fantasy stories, who loves meaningful choices in their games and in their stories would love this game. But it is also not an easy game to really get into, I think. For me, it was intuitive because I played the first. I'm very well versed in playing RPG games. Without knowing anything of how this game worked, I got into it. It's like, yep, this, and this, and having that background of playing Dungeons and Dragons and being very familiar with the rules helps so much with it. And that's one of the things that frustrates me about this game is that there's some things that they absolutely don't explain. It's like, how does this work? How long does this last? What does it do? I have no idea. Like at the end of the day, it didn't matter, but it's also very frustrating. It doesn't tell me. And there's a lot of other things that I understand and don't need someone to tell me what it means or how does it work, but I can see how people who don't have this background would find it very frustrating. So I don't know how those people would find it, how those players would find it. I would love to recommend it for everyone, but I do wonder how much of a barrier this game actually has because of its being an adaptation of a Dungeons and Dragons rule set, which is actually quite very deep, very complex, and not easy for the uninitiated.
I do agree with that. I think I've got some other comments on that in a sense as well. So we're quite close with Lee Sensei's sister and her said partner, and we often have D&D sessions. Now, Lee Sensei's brother-in-law, good guy, love good D&D session with him, and by love I mean love fighting him. And I don't mean as in combat in D&D, I mean as in fighting him on every word that comes out of his mouth. I've found that he doesn't particularly enjoy this game. But it's also entirely not surprising because he's a grinder. He likes grinding. He loves the XP and he loves to level up. In a sense, he's a very simplistic player, and that's literally not not intended as being offensive. He's got a very specific type of game that he loves, and while he enjoys playing D&D, I think it's for winding us up and enjoying the social aspect of that game. Yeah. Rather than the game itself in terms of its fantasy aspects. Whereas for us, and particularly me as a lover of fantasy and sci-fi fiction, it's like I'm living my wildest dreams from books come to life. And I'm a latecomer to D&D relatively. I mean, I've been playing, God, nearly 8 years now because you introduced it to me. So about 8 years I've been playing, and I still consider myself fairly new to it. It works for me because of what I love and the kind of games that I love. So even if people are familiar like he might be, it really does come down to what do you like about games? What do you find in enjoyment? This is a time investment. We've been playing for, personally, I think I have about 200 hours, 250 hours logged on this game, split between 3 games. No, and actually it's about 320 hours split between 3 games. So ours is a big chunk of that, but I've spent a lot of my own time playing that. I think on average I spent about 2 to 3 hours every day playing this game since it's been released, which is a hell of a lot of time. I've literally forgot where I was going with this.
Recommending the game?
Well, I think, yeah. in recommending this game, I think I can recommend it to try.
Yeah.
But don't buy it unless you've tried it first. Find your nerdiest friend.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, find someone who owns this game, who loves this game, play it with them, or play it and then they're next to you and they can help you understand how it works. Do that for a couple hours, and if you enjoy it, yeah, I think once you get past the first couple hours, and if you still enjoy it, then it's gonna work for you. But it will be very difficult, I think, to get over those barriers, the very high barriers to understand how this game works on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, I think that we've barely scratched the surface of this game in reality. We couldn't possibly cover it with the time that we've spent, and we've already gone over what we kind of anticipated. So if you do have any questions, comments, or you want us to make another video, go ahead and go to our socials and Girls in Gaming GG on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. Leave a message and we'll have a look at that. Maybe we could find some more time to rant and yell and talk endlessly about this game that now dominates our entire existence. So thanks for tuning in. Say goodbye, Lee Sensei.
Sayonara.
He had to think about that for a moment. Sayonara, everybody, and see you next time for another episode of Girls in Gaming. GG.